If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. When the channel reaches 1,000 subscribers, I'll share a surprise story I've prepared especially for you. Winter in 1944. The sky over the Eastern Front is a wide sheet of pale gray, heavy with snow and smoke. A damaged B-24 crawls across it, engines coughing unevenly. The aircraft has already lost altitude, and every vibration feels like a warning. Inside the tail section, Technical Sergeant Daniel Reed, 26, braces his boots against the metal floor as another burst of Soviet fire rips through the fuselage. Daniel has been a tailgunner for almost 2 years. He enlisted after his younger brother died during a training accident in the Pacific, a loss that left a permanent weight in his chest. Flying missions keeps him from thinking too long about home, but it also forces him to face everything he fears: fire, falling, and watching others die. Today, on this mission, his crew was tasked with hitting a railway junction used to feed the Soviet advance. It was meant to weaken supply lines. It was not meant to turn into a slaughter. Smoke rolls through the tail section. The smell of burning fuel and electrical wires stings his throat. He shifts in his seat, his hands tight around the handles of his twin .50s. His heart hits hard against his ribs. Each second feels stretched, not dramatic, just sharp and exhausting. He hears the intercom crackle with broken voices, the pilot shouting about Engine 2, the navigator trying to get coordinates out before losing signal. Daniel fires again at a Yak fighter sliding past his position. He doesn't think about aim. He just reacts. Stress keeps his movements sharp. Fear keeps him focused. The tail shakes under him, and bolts snap from the frame. A cold rush of air hits the side of his face. Something is tearing away. He checks behind him and sees a vertical crack widening along the joint where the fuselage meets the rear assembly. His stomach tightens. He doesn't expect to live through this, but he refuses to stop firing. If he stops, the fighter behind them will finish the job. Another violent hit kicks the tail sideways. The B-24 drops suddenly, then twists in the air. Daniel's shoulder slams against the metal. The intercom has gone silent. The faint voices of his crew are gone. He opens his mouth to call out, but the floor drops beneath him before he can speak. The tail section tears free with a loud, metallic snap. A blast of freezing wind punches through the open frame. The world flips. Daniel feels the safety belt rip off its mounting. His body is thrown backward into open air, and he falls with the torn tail assembly tumbling beside him. The cold hits him with an intensity that almost removes thought. The sky rotates. His breath disappears. He sees the ground rushing upward, a dark forest broken by white snow. He tries to adjust his limbs, but there's nothing he can do. He waits for the impact, every muscle locked, every thought reduced to one small, stubborn line. I'm not ready to die like this. He hits a snow-covered canopy of trees, crashing through the thick branches, each impact driving the air from his lungs. When he reaches the ground, the world blurs into soundless light. He cannot tell how long he lies there. His vision narrows, then fades. A few kilometers away, in a small Soviet village half buried in winter fog, Elena Markova, 24, steps out of the maintenance shack where she spends most of her days repairing trucks and generators for the Red Army. She used to work alongside her father in a civilian workshop before the war. Then the war took her father, her mother, and her home in a single bombing run. She was forced into military labor soon after. She has stayed alive by keeping her head down and doing whatever mechanical work the officers demand. Tonight, the cold is severe enough to cut through her coat. She lifts her lantern and listens. A distant explosion echoes from the direction of the forest. Aircraft wreckage, she thinks. Normally, she would ignore it. Anything involving the front lines is dangerous, but something about the sound pushes her to move. Maybe it's the isolation that has followed her for months. Maybe it's fear of what the snow will hide come morning. She grabs a wrench, the only thing she has ever used as a weapon, and walks toward the trees. The snow is deep. Her boots sink with every step. She follows a trail of broken branches until she sees a section of aircraft lodged against the base of a tree. Smoke leaks from torn metal. Nearby, she spots a body half covered in snow. She freezes, lantern held high. The uniform isn't Soviet. The man is American. Her first instinct is to step back. Any contact with the enemy can mean death. If the patrols find her here, they will accuse her of aiding him. She wants to walk away, but the idea of leaving someone alive under a burning wreck makes her chest tighten. She kneels beside him and checks his pulse with shaky fingers. He is alive, barely. His face is pale from cold, his breath thin, and his leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Burns mark the side of his coat. She hears a crack from the wreck, a shift in metal, a warning that the fuel tank might ignite. She looks at the flames creeping along a torn cable. She curses under her breath, drops the lantern, and pulls at his arms. Daniel wakes for a moment. His eyes open just enough to see a woman's shadowed face, framed by snow and lantern light. He tries to speak, but only a strained breath escapes. He doesn't know who she is. Soviet? Civilian? He cannot fight, cannot run, cannot decide anything. He only knows he is helpless in her hands, and fear mixes with a strange, desperate hope. Elena drags him backward with slow, steady movements. The wreck explodes behind them with a burst of heat that lights up the trees. She shields his body with hers until the flames settle. For a moment, she just breathes, try to control the shaking in her arms. She knows she has made a choice that cannot be reversed. She cannot leave him now. If he dies here, the patrols will blame her anyway. If he survives, turning him in means watching another person die in front of her. She cannot do it again. She lifts his arm over her shoulders and begins the long walk toward the village outskirts, one slow step at a time. Daniel drifts in and out of consciousness, his thoughts scattered, his mind fighting the cold. He does not understand why she is helping him, but he feels the pressure of her grip and the determination in her movements. In a moment of clarity, he realizes something simple and grounding. She's saving me. That thought keeps him awake. That thought keeps him calm. They disappear into the trees, leaving the burning wreck behind, two strangers bound by necessity and a choice neither expected to make. Elena pushes forward through the forest with Daniel's arm over her shoulders, each of his steps dragging more weight than the last. The wind cuts through her coat and stings her face, but she keeps moving. She knows exactly how long the patrols take to circle the village. She also knows her absence from the maintenance shed will be noticed soon. If anyone sees her carrying an American airman, there will be no questions, only punishment. Daniel's vision drifts in and out. When he opens his eyes, he sees the faint glow of her lantern in the distance and the narrow outline of her breath rising in the cold. He doesn't know her name yet. He doesn't know what she intends to do with him. Fear stays with him, but it's different now. Not an edge-of-death panic, but a quiet awareness that his life is in someone else's hands. He tries to speak, but the cold tightens his throat, and only a hoarse exhale escapes. Elena tightens her grip to keep him steady. She hears the tremor in his breathing and the strain in his attempts to sit upright. She slows her pace, scanning the tree line. She's not just worried about patrols. She's worried about her own doubts. She saved him because she could not leave another person to burn. Now she must decide what to do next. Hide him, abandon him somewhere he won't be found, or try to keep him alive long enough for the front line to shift again. None of those choices make sense, yet her steps keep carrying him closer to safety. By the time they reach the outskirts of the village, the sky has darkened enough to hide their silhouettes. Elena leads him to an old storage shed that once held tools and wheels before the war reduced the village to improvised military space. She pushes the door open with her shoulder and guides him inside. The air is stale, heavy with the scent of wood and dust, but at least it's warm enough for breath not to freeze. Daniel collapses onto the blankets she spreads on the floor. He grits his teeth against the pain in his leg. His ribs ache with every inhale. He feels the heat returning to his hands in sharp, stabbing pulses. When Elena kneels beside him, he watches her expression, focused, tense, but not cruel. She works quickly, pulling off his gloves, cutting his torn boot open, and checking the swelling in his ankle. Her movements are careful, practiced. She has tended to injuries before, though probably not American ones. Water, he manages to whisper. She hands him a cup. Her hand trembles slightly from cold and nerves. He drinks slowly, trying to process everything. The fall, the crash, the stranger saving him. A question forms, one that any listener might ask. Why would she help an enemy soldier? What is she risking? Daniel asks it quietly. Why are you doing this? Elena stops working for a moment. The room is silent except for the wind brushing against the wooden walls. She struggles with the answer, not because she doesn't know it, but because saying it out loud makes it real. I've seen enough people die, she says. If I can stop one more death, even for one night, then I do it. Daniel listens to the sincerity in her voice. He sees the exhaustion in her posture. He remembers the way she shielded him from the explosion. His fear loosens, but not enough to trust fully. He is still behind enemy lines. He is still helpless. He wonders what she expects from him in return. He wonders if she plans to turn him in tomorrow. The uncertainty scratches at his nerves, yet he senses no hostility from her. Only restraint, only caution. Outside, the crunch of snow signals movement. Elena freezes. The hair on her arms rises. She blows out the lantern and presses her back to the door, listening. A Soviet patrol is passing closer than she expected. Voices drift through the cold. One man complaining about the crash search, another laughing about wanting to warm his hands by a stove instead of chasing ghosts in the forest. Daniel sits upright, ignoring the sharp pain shooting through his ribs. He sees the tension in her face and realizes she is risking far more than he understood. If they find him here, she will not have time to explain anything. She will be executed as a traitor. The voices fade. Snow settles again. Elena relights the lantern with careful movements. She doesn't speak, but Daniel can read the relief in her long exhale. She continues treating him, cleaning the cuts on his forehead and wrapping his leg. Daniel keeps his eyes on her hands. They're steady now, strong. He feels an unfamiliar sense of safety, fragile but real. Thank you, he says, his voice low. Elena nods once. Gratitude makes her uncomfortable. It reminds her she has tied her fate to a stranger. To shift the focus, she asks, "Where was your aircraft heading?" He answers honestly. Rail junction. Disrupt supplies. Standard mission. She absorbs this quietly. The mission explains the heavy patrol presence. It also explains why the officers earlier had been on edge. Elena sets her wrench beside the wall and pulls an old coat around her shoulders. Daniel watches her with growing clarity. He finally asks the question that has been circling in his mind. What about you? Why are you here? She hesitates, but answers anyway. They took me after my village was hit. They said I could repair engines, so I repair engines. That's all. Daniel hears the restrained bitterness in her voice and understands more than she says. She didn't choose this war either. She didn't choose to be alone. Silence settles between them. Not tense, not hostile, simply necessary. It's the kind of silence that forces both of them to think about what comes next. Daniel lies back, exhausted, his leg throbbing and his chest tight from the fall. Elena adjusts the blankets around him. She doesn't touch him more than needed, but every movement shows careful intention. For the first time since the plane went down, Daniel lets himself breathe without expecting the next moment to kill him. Elena sits beside the door, listening for patrols, keeping the lantern low. She knows she has crossed a line she cannot undo. But when she looks at Daniel, pale and barely holding himself together, she feels certain she made the right choice. The night deepens. The cold presses against the wooden walls. Inside the shed, two strangers remain awake, both trying to understand the other, both trying to survive the next hour without betrayal, both wondering if trust is even possible in a world that has left them with nothing else. And for now, at least, neither one turns away. The night passes without sleep. Daniel drifts in and out of short, uneasy moments of rest, but every small noise outside the shed tightens his chest. Each time he opens his eyes, he sees Elena sitting near the door with her back straight, listening for footsteps. She barely moves. Only her hands shift occasionally to warm themselves under her arms. By dawn, a pale blue glow leaks through the cracks in the wooden walls. The cold inside the shed is sharp enough that Daniel's breath comes out in visible bursts. Elena moves closer to the blankets and checks his leg again. The swelling has worsened. She expected this, but seeing it confirms something she had suspected and had not yet voiced. He will not be able to stand or walk unaided for several days. Daniel lifts his head slightly. His voice is rough, but steady. They'll be searching again today. Elena nods. Yes, they'll sweep the forest, then the village. They'll look for anything unusual. This raises a question any listener would naturally ask. Why doesn't she simply turn him in? Why risk herself further now that the danger is growing? Elena answers the unspoken thought by saying something she has been avoiding since last night. If they find you, they'll ask how you survived this long. They'll ask who helped you. They'll look at me. Even if I tell the truth or lie, it won't matter. I'll be punished either way. Daniel absorbs this explanation with a heavy exhale. He had suspected it, but hearing it spoken makes it undeniable. Their fates are tied together now, tightly, whether they want it or not. Elena brings him water and a small piece of stale bread from a hidden crate she keeps for herself. When she hands it to him, Daniel notices how thin her fingers are. She's been rationing food for months, maybe years. He feels guilt press against the back of his throat. You should eat, he says quietly. I did, she lies. He watches her eyes. She did not. Daniel breaks the bread in half and gives a piece back to her. I'm not dying today, he says in a steady tone. You're the one keeping me alive. You need the strength more than I do. Elena hesitates but accepts it, not out of politeness, but because she suddenly understands that he doesn't want a debt between them. Not a moral one, not an emotional one. He wants her to survive too. That shifts something inside her, something small but noticeable. A snowstorm begins around midday. The wind pushes against the shed, forcing drafts through every crack. The temperature drops even further. Elena brings the lantern closer to Daniel to give him some warmth. When the cold becomes unbearable, she sits near him, not touching him but staying close enough for their shared heat to matter. The storm traps them in silence. Daniel's thoughts grow clearer as the pain in his leg forces him into stillness. He watches Elena work, adjusting the blankets, checking the lantern's wick, listening for patrols. He notices the exhaustion under her eyes and wonders how long she's been alone like this, doing dangerous work for people who barely acknowledge her existence. To break the silence, he asks, How long have you been with the mechanics? Since I was 20, she replies. 3 years now. Where were you before? A different village. A different life. She rarely speaks about herself, but Daniel listens with the patience of someone who understands loss. Eventually, she reveals more, not dramatically, just with simple, honest words. Her family was killed in a bombing raid early in the war. Soldiers took her in because she knew engines. They promised shelter in exchange for labor. They promised food. They promised safety. None of those promises lasted. Her life became long days repairing trucks and long nights listening to the sounds of war inch closer. Daniel absorbs every detail. He recognizes her quiet resilience, the way she continues to move even when everything around her has stopped making sense. It reminds him of what kept him flying after his brother died. Not patriotism, not heroism, simply the need to keep going. His own story comes out in return. He explains how his brother enlisted first, how the accident during training broke their family apart, and how Daniel joined the war to carry something his family couldn't carry anymore. He doesn't say it to earn sympathy. He says it because he sees how much Elena deserves honesty. He wants her to know he isn't just a soldier flying over her land. He had a life once too. The storm continues for hours. The shed shakes but holds. As night settles again, Elena finally sits beside him, exhausted from staying alert all day. Their shoulders almost touch. Daniel feels the warmth of her presence and the weight of trust forming slowly, cautiously. He breaks the silence with a practical question. How long until they check this part of the village? 2 or 3 days, she answers. After that, they'll move the search north. But once they realize no body was recovered from the wreck, they'll look harder. This answers a question the listeners would naturally ask. Why don't they leave now? Why stay in the shed instead of fleeing immediately? They cannot move through a blizzard. Daniel cannot walk. Patrols are too close. Survival requires patience. Elena leans her head back against the wooden wall. Her eyes close for a moment. Daniel watches her breathing slow, and he realizes she hasn't rested since she found him. He adjusts the blanket so it covers her shoulders too. When her eyes open again, she doesn't pull away. She gives him a tired, cautious look, but there is no fear in it now. Only recognition that they are no longer just a soldier and a mechanic caught on opposite sides of a war. The storm outside continues into the night, but inside the shed, the space between them grows steady and warm. Neither speaks, yet the silence feels clearer than words. They do not trust each other completely, not yet, but the beginnings of trust settle into the cold air. Not because they choose it, but because survival demands it. And through the long, cold night, neither of them feels entirely alone anymore. The storm weakens by dawn, leaving the shed surrounded by deep, untouched snow. The air is colder than the previous days, frost forming around the edges of the door and drifting through the cracks in thin white lines. Daniel wakes first, his leg throbbing with a steady ache, but his mind clearer than it has been since the crash. Elena sleeps lightly beside the door, her head resting against the wooden wall. It is the first time Daniel has seen her asleep. Her shoulders are stiff, her hands loosely gripping the wrench she refuses to leave behind. She looks younger like this, tired, drained, but with a kind of stubborn strength that has carried both of them through the last days. He doesn't wake her. He knows she rarely gets rest, and he knows the search patrols will be back soon. A sharp whistle echoes faintly through the morning air. Daniel stiffens. He recognizes the pattern. Not American, not German, but Soviet signaling between patrol groups. The search teams are coordinated. They're close. Too close. Elena wakes instantly, as if her body can sense danger before her mind fully registers it. She listens, her jaw tightening. They're sweeping south, she says quietly. They're coming this way. Daniel braces himself on his elbows. How long until they reach the village edge? An hour, she replies. Then after a pause, maybe less. This moment answers a question listeners might wonder. If the patrols were searching earlier, why didn't they find any signs near the shed? The snowstorm erased their tracks, and the first sweep focused on the crash site and the forest trails, not the abandoned outskirts. Now that the weather has cleared, the soldiers will begin searching structures. Elena stands and moves quickly. We can't stay. They will check every building. Daniel tries to sit up, but winces from the pain in his leg. I'm not ready to walk. She doesn't hesitate. You'll have to. I'll support you. She wraps his leg with tighter cloth strips, then hands him her brother's old coat. Daniel feels the weight of it. Heavy, worn, carrying the warmth of someone she trusted once. Are you sure? He asks. Elena nods. It's warmer than yours. You'll need it. This addresses a question some might ask. Why does she keep helping him if it risks her life even more now? The answer is in her actions. She has chosen not to abandon him, and once she chooses something, she sees it through. Elena slips her shoulder under his arm and helps him stand. Daniel grits his teeth as pressure hits the injured leg, but he doesn't complain. There's no time. The urgency outside is too real. They leave the shed quietly and move into the forest once more, their steps slow but determined. The snow muffles their movement, but it also slows them. Daniel leans heavily on her, trying to keep his weight distributed, not wanting to drag her down. She adjusts calmly, each step deliberate. As they move deeper into the forest, voices rise behind them. Daniel looks back and sees dark silhouettes entering the outskirts of the village. Elena pulls him forward. They found the shed, she whispers. How can you tell? They always spread out in pairs when they think someone is hiding. Her instincts are sharp, shaped by years of surviving under military watch. Daniel follows her lead as she guides him along a narrow path between thick pines. She avoids the open areas, stepping over broken branches and keeping her body angled toward his to shield his movements. Minutes stretch into long, breathless silence. Daniel's leg grows weaker, and his breath shortens. He worries he will slow her enough to get them caught. "You can leave me," he says quietly, forcing the words out. "You still have time." Elena stops and looks at him with a sharp seriousness. "I'm not leaving you," she says. "Not now." It is not an emotional declaration. It is said plainly, as if she is confirming something she has already decided firmly. Daniel nods, accepting her choice, but still carrying the weight of guilt. They continue until they reach an old trench line, partially hidden under the snow. The walls are frozen and collapsing, the remnants of a forgotten battle. Elena leads him carefully along the edge, using the trench walls as cover from the patrols behind them. Daniel follows, but each step sends a sharp pulse through his leg. He bites down on the pain. After a long silence, the sound of snapping branches echoes from behind them. A patrol is close, too close to outrun. Elena reacts instantly. She pulls him down behind a fallen pine trunk, large enough to hide their bodies. She extinguishes the lantern and presses a hand gently against Daniel's chest to keep him still. Two Soviet soldiers walk past, their rifles held loosely, their boots crunching loudly. One complains about the cold. The other mutters that an American gunner couldn't have survived the fall. Elena's eyes remain fixed on them until their footsteps fade. Daniel's heart pounds in his chest. He whispers, "You knew they'd come this way." "Yes," she answers. "They follow the trench. It's the easiest path." This moment resolves another question listeners might have. How does Elena know where to go? She has worked in this region for years. She knows the patrol routes, the weak points in their search patterns, and the terrain better than the soldiers who rotate through. They move again once the patrols are gone. The forest thickens, the trees forming a natural barrier. Daniel's strength is fading, and Elena senses it. She adjusts her pace, guiding him forward without words. Near dusk, they reach the remains of an old boundary post, cracked, leaning, half covered in snow. "How far is the neutral zone?" Daniel asks, breathless. "Not far," Elena replies. "Just beyond the ridge." But before they can move, a shout echoes through the trees. Someone's there. A patrol has spotted their trail. Elena reacts with fierce urgency. She grips Daniel's arm and pulls him along the ridge path. Snow slides beneath their feet. Daniel stumbles, but she catches him. Gunshots crack behind them. Bark splinters off the trees. The pursuit is real, but the forest works in their favor. Branches block clear aim, and the terrain slows the soldiers behind them. They reach the top of the ridge. Daniel's legs nearly give out. Elena holds him upright with both arms, breathing hard but steady. "Just a little more," she says, guiding him down the slope. The patrol reaches the ridge and yells out in frustration. The forest becomes too dense for them to follow. Their silhouettes disappear among the trees. Finally, at the bottom of the slope, Daniel and Elena collapse into the snow, breaths trembling, bodies exhausted. Behind them, the forest goes silent again. Elena scans their surroundings. "We're close," she says quietly. "We can make it before morning." Her words carry more certainty than she feels, but Daniel believes her because she hasn't led him wrong once. For the first time since the crash, he lets his head rest against the snow and allows himself a moment of relief. They survived the day. They survived the pursuit. And now, there's only one direction left, forward. Night settles around them, the air cold but quieter, and together they prepare for the final stretch towards safety, knowing that everything they endured has brought them to this fragile point where escape is no longer a distant hope, but an approaching reality. The forest settles into an eerie stillness after the patrols fall out of sight. Snow hangs thick in the branches above, and every breath leaving Daniel's mouth feels heavier than the last. Elena keeps one hand firmly under his arm, supporting his weight as he tries to stand again. His leg trembles beneath him, but he forces himself upright. They cannot rest long. The patrol could circle back. The cold could become another enemy. Survival depends on movement, slow, careful, but steady. Elena waits for Daniel's breathing to calm before guiding him forward, deeper into the dense trees. The ridge behind them grows smaller with each step. Ahead, the forest thins. A faint orange glow flickers through the branches, too steady to be fire from a crash, too low to be a military outpost. Elena studies it carefully. It's a camp, she says. Civilians. Aid workers, maybe. This answers a question any listener would have. Who would be in a neutral area in the middle of war-torn forest? During harsh winters, relief groups often set up temporary shelters for refugees fleeing both armies. Elena remembers hearing rumors about such convoys months ago, small, scattered, traveling under neutral flags, helping whoever they could without reporting to either side. Daniel leans on her as they approach the camp. He can barely feel his injured leg now. Numbness replaces pain. But he forces himself forward, knowing this is their last chance. If this camp turns them away, they have nowhere else to go. As they break through the final layer of trees, a handful of people turn toward them. Lanterns illuminate their faces, a mix of men and women wearing thick coats with patches marking them as medical volunteers. The snow around their tents glows gold under the lights. There is no sign of weapons, no uniforms, no tension in their movements. A middle-aged man with a medical armband steps closer. His eyes widen slightly at the sight of Daniel's limp and Elena's exhausted posture. "What happened?" he asks in a steady tone. Elena answers without hesitation. "Aircraft crash. He fell through the forest. He's been injured for days." The man steps forward, supporting Daniel's other side. Two volunteers bring a stretcher. Daniel tries to refuse, knowing Elena still needs protection too, but his legs collapse the moment he puts weight on them. They lift him carefully. The relief that follows feels overwhelming. No fear, no running, just hands guiding him somewhere warm. Elena stands back, watching as they carry him into a heated tent. A volunteer approaches her. "You're freezing," the young woman says. "Come inside before you collapse." Elena hesitates. Something inside her still expects consequences, interrogation, blame. She's prepared to lie if necessary, to protect Daniel, to protect herself. But the woman's expression is calm, almost gentle. "We don't report anyone," she adds softly. "Not soldiers, not refugees, not strays from the front. Whoever reaches us, we keep alive." This resolves another question listeners might have wondered from the beginning. Would Elena be punished if she were found with Daniel? What happens to her now? In this camp, the war does not rule. Her actions have no military repercussions here. Inside the tent, Daniel lies on a cot while the volunteers check his injuries. His leg is examined, cleaned, and splinted properly. A medic presses a warm cloth against his forehead. Daniel closes his eyes, not from pain, but from the overwhelming sense of safety. He asks one question before drifting toward sleep. "Where's Elena?" "She's here," the medic says. "She's safe." Elena sits nearby, watching him with her hands clasped, unsure what to say now that they no longer need to run. The fear that has driven them for days begins to loosen, replaced by exhaustion and something gentler, a quiet disbelief that they made it this far together. Over the next several days, their recovery becomes a routine. Daniel regains strength slowly. Elena helps him sit up, walk with crutches, and eat full meals again. Volunteers teach her small mechanical tasks to help around the camp. Nobody questions them. Nobody asks for sides or reasons. Listeners might ask, what happens to Daniel's crew? Will the U.S. military search for him? A messenger from a northern outpost brings news one afternoon. Daniel's aircraft was reported lost with all hands assumed dead. No recovery mission will be launched. As far as his unit knows, he died in the sky. Daniel listens quietly, absorbing the finality of it. It hurts, but it also frees him. No more missions, no more flying into fire. His survival belongs to him now. Another question arises naturally. What will happen to Elena? The camp offers her permanent shelter. They need mechanics. They need hands that can fix engines, sleds, heaters, and generators. For the first time since her village fell, she is given work without cruelty, food without rationing, and sleep without fear. Daniel and Elena remain in the same settlement as winter deepens. He helps where he can, carrying supplies, assisting in repairs once his leg strengthens, and offering the calm steadiness that kept him alive in the tail gunner's seat. She works beside him often, their movements slowly aligning with a familiarity born from survival. Their connection does not become dramatic or romantic. It becomes practical, steady, and real. Two people sharing silence without tension, sharing meals without obligation, and sharing small, grounding gestures. Elena places a scarf around his neck on a cold morning. Daniel repairs the handle of her lantern. Their gratitude deepens into companionship, the kind built not from declarations but from staying when they could have walked away. One clear morning, weeks after the escape, Daniel walks without crutches for the first time. Elena stands beside him, arms folded, watching with a faint smile that she tries to hide. "You're doing better," she says. "Because you kept me alive," he answers. They walk beyond the camp, stopping on a rise, overlooking a stretch of quiet winter fields. The war feels distant here. No aircraft, no patrols, no gunfire, just cold air, open land, and the simple fact that both of them survived when they shouldn't have. Elena looks at him, not asking for anything, not expecting anything. Daniel looks back with the same calm certainty. They don't need to define what they shared. They already know it: survival, trust, understanding, and a future neither expected to reach. For the first time since the crash, Daniel feels the weight on his chest ease. Elena's shoulders relax too. Their lives begin again, not as prisoners of war or strangers hiding in a shed, but as two people who chose each other when the world gave them nothing else. And with the snow settling quietly around them, the story ends, not with unanswered questions, not with fear or loss, but with a quiet, steady happiness that feels earned and true.